She vanished in broad daylight, in a place she trusted, doing a job surrounded by family. And that is what makes Brooke Wilberger's story so deeply disturbing. There was no risky choice, no hidden life, no warning sign, just an ordinary morning that turned into silence. What followed was years of unanswered questions, false leads, and a family forced to live inside uncertainty while a predator walked free. This case is not only about a crime, but about how easily routine can be shattered, how long truth can stay buried, and how justice, when it finally comes, never erases the weight of loss. A disappearance in plain sight exposes how safety, trust, and routine can fracture in a single unguarded moment. You think danger announces itself, that it arrives loudly and violently, wearing a face that is easy to recognize. But the most disturbing truth in Brooke Wilberger's case is that nothing about the morning of May 24, 2004 felt dangerous at all. It was warm, ordinary, and predictable. The kind of day that confirms our belief that routine keeps us safe. Brooke was 19 years old, the fifth of 6 siblings in a close-knit Oregon family, raised with deep faith, discipline, and compassion. She was known for academic excellence, athletic ability in basketball, snowboarding, and running, and a gentle personality that became firm when she saw injustice. She attended Brigham Young University, studying speech pathology after overcoming her own childhood speech delay, and she was dating Justin, a childhood friend who shared her faith and values. There was no chaos in her life, no rebellion, no secrecy, and that is exactly why her disappearance shattered so many assumptions. When Brooke returned home for the summer, she took a job at Oak Park Apartments in Corvallis, a property managed by her sister Stephanie and brother-in-law, a place that felt protected by family and familiarity. On the morning of her disappearance, Stephanie saw Brooke around 10 a.m. cleaning an exterior light fixture, standing on a bucket of water, fully visible to the world. This moment matters because it tells us the crime did not happen in shadows, but in plain sight. Hours later, when Brooke failed to show up for lunch, concern replaced routine. Stephanie went outside and found the bucket still there, abandoned mid-task, and nearby were Brooke's flip-flops, muddy and torn, not placed neatly, but left as evidence of a struggle. Brooke's car was locked, and inside were her phone, purse, and wallet, silent proof that she had not chosen to go anywhere. This was the moment the family understood that trust had been violated and safety had collapsed. Police immediately treated the case as critical because Brooke's responsible nature ruled out voluntary disappearance. Witnesses reported hearing a scream around 10:30 a.m., a sound that no one could place and no one could undo. The investigation exploded outward, with police and the FBI canvassing more than 2,000 residents, volunteers flooding search areas, and the community uniting around Brooke's image. Justin was ruled out quickly because he was on a church mission in Venezuela, reinforcing the reality that there was no personal betrayal to explain what happened. Desperation led investigators to Soo Kim, a man with a disturbing history of stealing women's underwear from college dorms. A search of his home revealed thousands of stolen items and graphic material depicting sexual violence, along with a document outlining sexually motivated crimes and methods to evade law enforcement. For a moment, fear felt satisfied, but facts intervened. Phone records, receipts, and alibis proved Kim was home with his father at the time Brooke vanished, and he was cleared, later serving time only for burglary. This part of the story exposes how badly we want certainty, even when it is wrong. Attention then shifted to reports of a dark green vehicle, possibly with Minnesota plates, seen near the university, with female students describing unsettling encounters with the driver. Still, no arrest came, and time stretched into months. 6 months later, in Albuquerque, a young Russian exchange student escaped an attempted abduction involving a knife. The suspect was Joel Patrick Courtney, a man with a long criminal history of sexual violence, drug abuse, and intimidation.
His sister later described years of disturbing behavior, early drug use, fascination with Satanism, and escalating brutality. Investigators noticed similarities between the Albuquerque attack and Brooks' disappearance, and crucially, Joel was confirmed to have been in Corvallis on the day Brooke vanished. Forensic evidence ended the uncertainty when Brooks' DNA was found inside Joel's green minivan, and strands of her hair were discovered in his possession. In December 2016, Joel was charged with aggravated murder, kidnapping, and sexual offenses. He denied knowing Brooke and mocked the charges, maintaining control through defiance. For years, he withheld the location of Brooke's remains, using the family's pain as leverage in negotiations. Eventually, after agreeing to plead guilty and avoid the death penalty, he led authorities to a remote area 12 miles west of the abduction site. Brooke was identified through dental records and a silver watch given to her by her mother, a small object carrying immeasurable grief. In court, Joel confessed to targeting multiple women that day, posing as a delivery driver, using a knife to abduct Brooke, sexually assaulting her, binding her, leaving her overnight, and killing her with a blunt object when she resisted. He showed no remorse and was sentenced to life without parole. The FBI believes he may be connected to other assaults and murders. This keynote ends where the family's reality begins, with Brooke's sister Stephanie describing a pain that never leaves, and her mother Cammie explaining grief as an iceberg, where what the world sees is only a fraction of what is carried beneath the surface. This is Keynote 1 because it is not just about what happened to Brooke Wilberger, but about how quickly normal life can fracture, how trust can be weaponized, and how the most disturbing crimes do not interrupt routine, they hide inside it.
The Long Road to Truth reveals how persistence, forensic science, and moral courage collide with denial and evil, and it must be understood not as a straight line, but as years of frustration, misdirection, and emotional endurance. After Brooke Wilberger vanished, the world expected answers quickly, because we are conditioned to believe that truth emerges fast when enough people care. But investigations do not move at the speed of grief, they move at the speed of evidence. And in Brooke's case, the absence of immediate proof created a vacuum where fear, suspicion, and false certainty rushed in. Law enforcement faced a brutal reality. There was no crime scene in the traditional sense, no body, no weapon, no eyewitness who saw the abduction itself. All they had were fragments, a scream without a face, flip-flops torn without a name attached to the hands that ripped them, and a young woman whose life stopped mid-task. This is where persistence becomes an act of faith, not religious faith, but faith in process, in patience, in the belief that truth leaves traces even when it hides. The investigation stretched across cities and states, years turning into decades, with detectives changing, technologies evolving, and memories fading. Yet Brooke's case never closed, never rested, never slipped into a forgotten file. This matters because unresolved cases test the moral spine of institutions. It is easy to pursue justice when evidence is loud. It is much harder when it whispers. The Sue Kim chapter exposed one of the most painful tensions in the search for truth, the difference between suspicion and proof. Everything about him felt wrong. His behavior was disturbing. The materials found in his home were horrifying. Emotionally, he fit the story people needed, but the truth does not bend to emotional relief. Alibis, timestamps, and corroboration mattered more than instinct, and clearing him, though deeply unpopular, protected the integrity of the case. This was not a failure of justice, it was restraint. And restraint is one of the most underappreciated forms of courage in investigations. Had police forced the story to end there, Brooke's real killer would have remained free. The road to truth often requires us to tolerate discomfort longer than we want to. The lead involving the dark green vehicle illustrates another painful reality. Witnesses can sense danger without being able to name it. Female students felt fear, reported encounters, remembered fragments, but fragments alone could not hold a conviction.
Still, those reports mattered. They stayed in the system, they waited, and when Joel Patrick Courtney appeared months later in Albuquerque, those fragments found context. This is how truth often works, not as revelation, but as alignment. The attempted abduction in New Mexico was not just another crime, it was a mirror, reflecting patterns that had already existed. Same type of victim, same method, same predatory confidence. Joel's arrest did not immediately solve Brooke's case, but it cracked something open. His presence in Corvallis on the day Brooke disappeared transformed coincidence into probability, and probability, when paired with science, becomes certainty. Forensic evidence is not dramatic, it does not shout, it does not cry, it waits. Years after Brooke vanished, advances in DNA testing allowed investigators to examine Joel's green minivan with new precision. When Brooke's DNA was found inside that vehicle, the case crossed an invisible threshold. This was no longer about belief or narrative. This was biology, telling a story the suspect could not silence. Hair strands found in Joel's possession further tightened the truth around him. And yet, even then, justice did not arrive cleanly. Joel denied everything. He mocked the charges. He claimed ignorance. This denial was not about innocence, it was about power. Some offenders cling to denial because it is the last place they feel control. The most excruciating phase of the road to truth was not proving Joel's guilt, but extracting the final piece of truth he withheld, the location of Brooke's remains. For Brooke's family, this was a second imprisonment, living with answers that stopped inches short of peace. Joel used that knowledge as currency, negotiating prison conditions, delaying closure, asserting dominance even from behind bars. This is where moral courage enters the story, not just from investigators, but from the family who endured negotiations that felt like betrayal layered on top of loss. Agreeing to terms was not weakness, it was strategy, in service of dignity. When Joel finally led authorities to Brooke's remains, the truth emerged not triumphantly, but quietly, from a remote road, from bones identified by dental records, from a silver watch that carried a mother's love. In court, Joel confessed, not with remorse, but with chilling clarity. He admitted to stalking, to failed attempts, to success through violence, to assault, to murder. His words closed the legal case, but they did not close the emotional one. He was sentenced to life without parole, and the FBI continues to believe his crimes extend beyond Brooke. This keynote is not about celebrating conviction. It is about understanding cost. Truth demanded time, restraint, science, courage, and the willingness to endure uncertainty longer than comfort allows. Brooke's case teaches us that justice is not a moment, it is a process, and that process asks more of victims and families than we ever publicly acknowledge. The aftermath shows how families live with grief, not as an event, but as a lifelong relationship with loss, one that reshapes identity, memory, faith, and time itself. When the courtroom empties and the headlines fade, grief does not conclude, it settles in. For the Wilberger family, justice did not arrive as relief, it arrived as confirmation of what they already feared, and confirmation is a heavy thing to carry. Brooke did not return as a memory, she remained a presence, a constant reference point around which every future moment would now bend. This is the part of the story that rarely fits into documentaries because it has no climax, no resolution, only continuation. Brooke's sister, Stephanie, has spoken about the way the mind survives tragedy, by refusing to replay the day of disappearance, by pushing away guilt before it becomes unbearable, by learning how not to ask questions that have no answers. This is not avoidance, it is survival. Grief forces people to become strategic with their own thoughts. Brooke's mother, Cammie, offered one of the most honest metaphors for loss when she described grief as an iceberg. What the world sees is the surface, the tears at anniversaries, the visible sadness, the words spoken in public. But beneath the surface is the real weight, the submerged mass of grief that never melts. It lives in ordinary moments, in holidays, in empty chairs, in the passing of time that Brooke never got to experience. Parents do not stop parenting when a child is murdered. They parent absence. They imagine birthdays that never come, futures that will never unfold, and versions of their child that only exist in their minds. This is not something closure erases. Closure is a legal concept, not an emotional one. Faith played a complicated role in the Wilberger family's journey. It did not protect Brooke, and it did not soften the brutality of what happened, but it offered a language for endurance. Brooke's boyfriend, Justin, her siblings, and even Joel Courtney's sister Dina spoke about truth, accountability, and moral responsibility through the lens of belief. Dina's decision to cooperate with investigators, despite the horror of recognizing her brother's capacity for violence, represents a rare form of courage, the kind that chooses truth over blood loyalty. This reminds us that the aftermath of violence spreads outward, touching families on both sides of the crime, forcing people to confront identities they never asked to inherit. The FBI's belief that Joel may be connected to other assaults and murders adds another layer to the aftermath, one that never fully settles. For families like the Wilbergers, justice for Brooke exists alongside the haunting possibility that there are other victims, other families carrying similar icebergs of grief. This awareness does not bring peace, it expands the moral weight of the story. Brooke becomes not only a daughter and sister, but a warning, a reminder of how predators operate and how easily routine can be exploited. What remains after everything is said and sentenced is not closure, but responsibility. Responsibility to remember Brooke as more than a victim, as a young woman with discipline, kindness, faith, and purpose. Responsibility to acknowledge that justice systems work slowly and imperfectly, but persistence matters. Responsibility to understand that grief does not end, it evolves. Brooke's life was interrupted, but her impact continues through the questions her case forces us to ask about safety, vigilance, and empathy. This keynote ends not with resolution, but with truth. Some losses do not fade. They become part of who we are, and learning to live with that truth is the final, quiet aftermath of violence.
If you're still here watching, thank you. Before you go, please subscribe to our channel, Dark Frame Stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another real-life mystery like this.